Thank you, Jostein, for the introduction. I want to thank you, Lars from Hades as well. He was giving a very good segue of talking about brands and how they are taken out into the world through services and visual identities. My objective here today is not really to learn you how to create a service as a brand. I tricked Jostein to invite me come to this stage. I'm here to talk about brand thinking, and I want to make you all brand thinkers. To do that, we're going to talk a bit about the relation, and then we're going to give you some examples. At the end of this, you will probably understand that you've seen these examples before, and the reason why we're using these examples is exactly because you've seen them before. So be aware, you know everything already. The fact we're trying to engage here is we never engage more with brands than we do right now. And it's not just because we see advertising everywhere and it's influencing us on so many levels at all places. We now also have content marketing, mixing the areas between what's editorial and what's advertising. And we have clever and better ways of sneaking commercial content into our lives. The borders between what's advertising, what's like relevant brand building, and what's a service are sort of floating around. We're not sure exactly how it works anymore. One of these reasons is because our lives have started to turn into the mobile phone. This device is making you a battlefield for brands, and what you're seeing is, I didn't cue these battlefield sounds, just so you know. Anyway, all of these branded experiences are battling out for you. I'm trying to cue sound, no. And every time you open an app, you are in a branded universe. And that universe is somebody decided it for you to be that way. And as you are developing services and building services, you understand how these processes come to be. One of the useful ways of looking at brands in this way will be starting with a definition. It would be a good introduction to it. We see brands as names with power to influence. They are influencing us in so many different ways, but primarily they're used to influence your buying decisions. But now they're also influencing every time you open up your phone, every time you do something, every time you buy something, think something, vote for something. It's almost like a brand has been influencing you in one way or the other. To find a way to make a company, a business, understand how to create this power, Michael Kornberger has put up a very nice formula that says brand equals functionality plus meaning. Now, designers are often very good at understanding functionality, right? We understand what it's supposed to do. We can address it from the problem point of view. And advertisers or brand people or even marketers, maybe particular marketers, are very good at subtracting what's the meaning behind these products. They can tell us stories that we didn't even know that we wanted to hear about that functionality. Why something simpler, faster, better, more engaging, that is the meaning of the brand, right? Brand thinkers are taking all of this in, and when we're helping businesses in Norway and everywhere else, we're trying to ensure that both the business, including designers and business people and top management and marketers and people who work on service and in HR, understand this whole complex picture. So how do you start doing these kind of things? Well, design people often got a lot of canvases. We got models. Some people would say models are better. I would say they are confusing and difficult, and sometimes difficult to make sure that they work in the organization. So a lot of these different types of brand building models that are being used, most of them are quite helpful when we all understand them, but they encapsulate so much stuff. So to make it a bit easier, I've made this starting point for you, and we're going to talk a bit about the relation. So the relation is the vessel that makes sure that the value is delivered to users, right? And that relation is different from brand to brand. It's different from product to product. It's different from category to category. And the interface is something that is often quite easy to talk about because it's so tangible, right? We can say it's on a phone, it's an app, it's in the store, or it's when you log on to something. But what's difficult to understand is that the interface between the brand rather than the service alone is often way bigger than just what you're holding in your hand. So the interface with the brand is not only every touch point, but it's also how you see this brand in the context of yourself. So the interface is actually a bit more complex and difficult to understand than you might think. The interface is obviously super, super important when you're talking to services and products that are going into the hands of a consumer, right? But they're equally important when you're talking to people who are working with B2B companies. The interface is often something we're also quite good at talking about, right? So how you feel about things. What does it lead to? What kind of a user experience, the UX? I just realized when I seen the UX and I seen the CX, right? And now we're going to have the BX. After that, it will be the BS, and that's not a very good stage to end up in. But the brand experience is also a bit broader than what you just see in the interface, because that also encapsulates all of these touch points. It's often very important to understand from a brand perspective, how often do you engage with it? How much do you engage with it? How much do you care when you engage with it? Do you even care? Do you care about the company behind it, or is that not important? Do you care about the colors and the logos and everything? Do you really care about the user flow or not? Do you need friction or you need smoothness, right? All of these kind of things needs to be defined and understood from an organizational perspective to be able to create holistic brand experiences. The story side of things are sometimes a very much overlooked aspect in business today. And the reason for that is that we believe that these stories about our companies are just being lived out, right? The companies are just there and things happen to them. They react to what's going on in society. They create a new product and then they put out. And there's absolutely no direction over it. It's just like a random sequence of events. But what we're looking for is to create strategic narratives that broadens the gaps between what the interface and the experience and all of these touch points that you may or may not control. In all of this, there is an understated fact, which is very true, which is that all brands do not need to be loved, right? Brands do not have the need that people have. Brands only needs to be used. So a lot of brand people are trying to claim that you need to create all of this equity and value, and you need to be loved, and you need to have all of these emotions going on. And sometimes that's very relevant, very important. But the primary function of a brand is actually to be understood so that the product, the service, the value proposition can be delivered in the most efficient way possible. So returning to my very simple examples, we're going to talk about Facebook a bit. So we all used it for a long time. We know what it is. We don't need to talk about all of these kind of things. But the overarching story about Facebook is not one of innovation. It's not one of social network or anything like that. Because every user is always thinking about themselves. No, Facebook is what we call an everyman's brand. It's for everyone, everywhere. It's always available, and it's always confirming who you are, what you like, and is always referring back to you as the individual here. For those of you who've seen The Truman Show, which is like a brand paradise movie in so many ways because they created a unique universe for everyone to understand. Noah Emmerich's character here is the buddy who always shows up with a six-pack. And that is basically the digital, or the equivalent of the digital interface that the Facebook offers all users. Whenever you feel like you need something, you could just log on and then you're instantly connected. Being instantly connected is something very, very deeply rooted in us. And we need to do that at occasions, otherwise most people will actually go nuts. So this global and very simple to understand appeal of the story of Facebook is something which can sort of help us understand why this app, this social network app, can actually be reaching so many million people all over the world with very, very minimal friction. A lot of other people will tell you that it's the network effect. You need to be in, and the value of the network increases, and we as users get this value if everybody joins in. That's not really always the case. It's what it does for us individually, which is important from a brand perspective. When you see Mark Zuckerberg defending his company when they've done something bad, and they do that all the time. You see he's communicating constantly from the vision of the company, which is to connect people, right? To get everybody to join in on this big, long-term vision of connect every human being on the earth. And we can understand that, right? Facebook is a very understandable brand. Another brand that's very understandable is Uber. Now, it's a bit unfair to use this type of information, the commercial from Uber from a few years ago, but it illustrates very well the foundations of the brand of Uber, right? Uber is showing us a way of doing transportation better than the taxis. They're inefficient, they smell bad, and you need to pay the guy in the front seat. Oh, there's a problem with tipping. You don't have any control, you don't know where the taxi is. So many easy to use use case scenarios that we can all relate to, which are problems for us in everyday life. And Uber claims to be better. And Uber does not claim to be better in a very nice way about it either, right? Look at this picture. Look at this guy. He's probably like a bro tech guy from Silicon Valley, 24 years old. And suddenly he has a private driver. Who has private drivers nowadays, right? Who wants to do this? Well, everyone wants to be him. Nobody wants to be him, because him, as you as the users, are the kings and queens of this universe. You're in control of everything. So Uber is a very top-down type of brand. The guy in front seat is... I wish I could time these cues much better. The guy in the front seat, the guy driving, is your servant, right? You are at the top, he is at the bottom. There's a system here, we can all relate. I don't even need to talk to the guy, right? It's called Uber. Remember all of the old designs that were black, a bit mysterious, looked like a cool nightclub type of thing, quite sexy. But it is a very top-down reservedom of people to serve our needs as functional, consumerist-oriented, self-absorbing human assholes that we are, right? So we understand Uber as a brand quite easily, because that's exactly the same thing when we get into a taxi. That guy in the front seat is there to drive us where we want to go. And also remember that Uber had the vision. I'm not sure exactly the last formulation is, but Uber's vision was to offer transportation as available as running water, right? So they're looking at transportation, or basically cab service, as infrastructure. And who does have like visions of infrastructure? Who provides infrastructure? Who provides running water to cities and clean up the streets? Well, authoritarian elements in society carries that load, right? They do this for us. So Uber is what we call a ruler brand, and we understand this story, whoever we are. Those two examples, as far as I've been able to study, doesn't have a lot of brand consultants involved in them. So they're not like a grand scheme here. It's just organizations that have been developed through a core understanding of their service into the society, and then the brand is created, and then it's executed to a very, very high scale, high pace, and effective manner. Another brand that has experienced a lot of this is also someone who talked here today, and will talk more in the conference, is Vipps. I've been lucky enough to follow this journey quite closely, and for those who are not Norwegian or use this service, I guess you will just understand what I'm saying when I'm talking about it. So this story about Vipps is not a story about just making people pay between friends easier. It's not just vendebetaling. It's about extreme simplification of things that used to be a bit more complicated. So it's all of those type of things in societies that is actually a bit of friction, a bit of nasty, boring shit, like things not really going that right thing you want to do. Well, that is the idea that you will think that Vipps might be able to do that for you. They started off with payments, and they will probably always continue in payments, but it's definitely a story about these little miracles of technology, those things that make just things slightly better. And all of these brands that we're showing, everything that we're talking about here is not necessarily that they are defined and put into models and created all of these grand perspectives and narratives, Brand thinking is about placing businesses and services into society and making all of these kind of things work together. So to make sure that you get what brand thinking can do for you is to understand that brand thinking is very user-centric in the sense that you're looking at from the business and the service from the outside, and you try to fit it in to what the user needs and wants or desires, or maybe they don't even tell you that they want it, they just act on what you're putting out there. That's why I'm finding it so fascinating to work with people who run a lot of experiments or design sprints or work closely with users, is that they can very fast pick up on if the brand sticks, if it works or not. I think also one of the key things about user centricity is that we need to look at the holistic image of what a user is seeing, not just the problems that they're trying to solve. Second takeaway is that it's very business-centric. What we're trying to do in brand thinking is trying to take what the business strategy is and we try to boil it down into some key components that both the organization and the development and the user sort of can gather around and understand together. Sometimes it gets a bit complicated, right? We need to use terminology that's very, how can I put it, business-oriented, and sometimes it's there's a bit of friction of how to understand the various levels of this brand thinking. But the main goal is always to try to meet the business objectives with the brand, not necessarily the brand objectives. So I hope that when you go back and you sit and try to develop new services and you're trying to help out your organization, either with creating something new or work on what's already there, you're trying to understand that there's a larger context of the relation that you have with your outside world than just problems or opportunities. There are stories, there are experiences, there are patterns, there are so many wonderful things that you can play around with to make sure that your services have a much faster and more efficient way to come to the market. And that is how I think you can create services that turns into the brands. Thank you.